Hey Scarefest, this is Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly. We've been spending some time over on Bonehead working on Dracula. A couple episodes we're going to dedicate to it. He's not my favorite horror character. He's not my favorite character in literature. He's not my favorite vampire. Actually, it's not even Dracula. But that being said, Dracula is really important. And once again, you're probably stuck at home looking for something to watch. Now, if you have some streaming services, I'm going to give you some of my favorite films that deal with Dracula. Number one being Hammer's horror of Dracula in some other countries, but in America we knew it as a horror of Dracula. Came out in the late 50s, and Hammer was a British film company that got its name basically making monster films. They did Frankenstein, they did Dracula, they did The Mummy, they did a bunch of Draculas. And they're like Universal. That's people forget that Universal basically was built on horror. Now, Hammer did it a little differently. They were in color. They were garish in the best possible way. The color, the blood popped, and they used something called cleavage. So there's a lot of blood and breast. You didn't really see a lot. It's more of a tantalizing, teasing kind of thing. But I was introduced to them as a young kid, and that's where I learned about Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, two of the greatest actors of all time. Christopher Lee, both of them were in Star Wars. If you don't know who they are, you probably should check those out. If you're watching the Vampire Diaries and you're a huge fan, you haven't seen some of these Dracula films I want to talk about, you really should. You should know the history, a little bit of vampires. Definitely check out The Horror of Dracula. It's on Hulu right now. Hulu. So if you have a subscription to Hulu, you can watch The Horror of Dracula. Another one that's on Hulu is the 1979 version of Dracula, directed by John Badham. John Badham was red hot off of making a little movie called Saturday Night Fever, and he actually got the chance to make this basically big budget TV movie with Frank Langella starring as a Dracula, but it tends to work. I saw this movie in reruns later when I was younger, and there's a scene where they descend into the crypt when they're looking for Lucy below the coffin. And I think it still holds up. Is it a perfect movie? No, but it's one of those that I enjoy from my childhood. Plus, it has Sir Laurence Olivier playing Van Helsing. So definitely check that out. It's on Hulu, 1979's Dracula. If you have Shudder, I highly recommend you take the time and watch this fantastic movie from the 70s called Blackula. Now, it sounds weird, but it's a blaxploitation film and actually has a really good performance by William Marshall. Blackula has a lot of cultural significance, and I still enjoy it. It's very much of its time, right? It's very much of that early 70s time. 1972 to be exact, but check it out. Check out Blackula. And the last one I want to recommend, if you're of a certain age like me, then you were just steeped in the early 90s to mid 90s, steeped in independent cinema. I mean, Pulp Fiction was blowing up. This movie's called Nadja. Nadja takes place in modern day New York in the 90s. And it's basically Dracula's granddaughter. Dracula has a small part of it as a throwback, but it's in black and white. It has a great soundtrack. A lot of you have never even heard of this, never even seen it. And that's the way it is with a lot of movies. They just kind of tend to get lost. I do have a copy of it. You can't find it. I know, I want you to see it, but you can't really find it. There may be an illegal version on YouTube. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? You'd have to go look. I also have a copy in my basement. So if you're really nice to me, I may show it to you. Nadja stars Peter Fonda actually as Van Helsing. And it's a realistic view of what this would have been like over the centuries, of what these people would be like. They're not necessarily counts and countesses living in a castle, and probably money runs out. It's a realistic view of a movie, and if you get a chance to watch it, probably most of you have never heard of it, and something I would recommend. This has been Joe Lewis, a Bonehead Weekly. It's a little bit different. I know I gave you several movies in a row, but this is your homework. Next week, when I check back in, I'm going to have a detailed questionnaire, and you better be able to pass it. Check out Bonehead Weekly. Thank you, Scarefest.